Good morning, colleagues, change makers, and friends. It is such an honor to be here before you at my first serious social investing conference. A place where ideas are formed, futures are imagined, and my sincere hope is that commitments are made. Huge thanks to the First Rand Foundation. Connie, thank you for your warm welcome. To Mercedes-Benz, to Gibbs, and to the magicians at Creative Space Media. And thank you to all of you for joining us here today. As has been mentioned, this is a personal milestone for me. This is not only my first SSI conference, but in fact my first keynote as the CEO of Tshikululu. Thank you. So I step into this role with a great respect for the 27-year history that our organization has had. From being an early leader in the social investment space, working with many of you in this room, and now to proudly being a partner to so many foundations, corporates, and governments. It is a real honor to be here with you today. These people in this room are the leaders who are molding and strengthening the industry that we serve. I also step into this role with a sense of urgency. We've asked the question, and I think for me it's quite specific. How do we collaborate to build a future that works? Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And Tato, I agree with you wholeheartedly that young people are both our greatest risk and our greatest opportunity in this country. I firsthand have seen what happens when you give a young person a chance. They so often go on to be the professionals, the entrepreneurs, and the change makers that will take this nation forward. We've all discussed the fact that South Africa faces the weight of entrenched poverty, youth unemployment, climate vulnerability, but that also poses an extraordinary opportunity for us, an opportunity to shift social investment from a peripheral role to that of a driving force for systemic change. That's the future that we are seeing at Tshikululu, and it's the future I'd like to share with you. I think a lot of you are familiar with some of these stats, but over the past 3 decades, social investment has become embedded in the social development landscape. So we know from Bridgespan's 2022 study that it's really only over the last few years that social investment and CSI has started to move past that compliance into more sustainable, systemic, strategic change. Trialogue reported that between 2023 and 2024, CSI spend has increased from 11.8 billion to 12.7 billion rand. That's the biggest jump since the pandemic. Unsurprisingly, education remains a focus for 92% of investors. But what has been mentioned today is that still, despite this, South Africa remains the most unequal society in the world. And I know that I've spoken to a lot of social impact practitioners and investors and donors, and how frustrated they are that this is still the case. We can't expect CSI, or even BBBE for that matter, to solve all of our structural problems. Government and foreign aid outspend CSI multiple times over. However, what CSI can do is drive innovation, partnership, and systemic change. It's not about charity anymore, it's about changing the system. And so I'd like to speak to you about some of the shifts and trends that we are seeing. I'll take you through 6, there's a lot. And try and give you some practical examples of what's working well and how we are responding as Tshikululu. So I think this is something that I've already hinted at. So we really are moving to a point of systemic change. The idea of strategic philanthropy is not new. We've spoken about shared value for a long time, but what we are seeing that is different is that this practice is really becoming embedded. It's no longer a tick box exercise. This is about reshaping systems. And I think 2 great examples of clients of ours is Optima and Discovery. So Optima has pivoted their strategy from supporting secondary schools to supporting early grade learning, where systemic impact is at its greatest. They've been really specific about partnering with government departments to improve curriculum delivery, educator support, and institutional capacity. And all of this is aligned with policy and really based on data. And so this team is focused on reshaping the education system for long-term change. Another client, Discovery, is well known for harnessing their intellectual property and data to strengthen systems and communities. Just 2 great examples that come to mind is Discovery and Sure using their car tracking data to take school children safely to school, and then obviously the well-loved pothole patrol that I think we all are quite familiar with. But I think the Discovery and Sure team is here today, and they'll probably take you through some more of the work that they're doing. The next trend that we're seeing, and this is very tied to the systemic strategic thinking, is the fact that we're moving from programs to partnerships. No single actor can solve youth unemployment, entrenched poverty, climate vulnerability, GBV. I think USAID's recent withdrawal from South Africa has really brought home the fact that we need to partner and we need local sustainable solutions. And I think some of the work that we're seeing and some of the partners are great examples of this. Just a few examples that come to mind. Josie My Josie. It is just such a beautiful public-private partnership that is focused on urban regeneration. The Google-backed Digital News Transformation Fund, in partnership with the Association of Independent Publishers and other industry bodies, and this is really looking at strengthening the resilience of our media sector, the enabling human rights. Another nice example is that in 2021, I think we all know that we had a lot of vaccines available at one stage, but not much uptake. Tshikululu and DG Murray Trust launched the Vaccine Challenge Fund, bringing together 4 social investors to support civil society and boost local mobilization in the national rollout. Outside of the Tshikululu realm is another public-private partnership that I'm particularly passionate about, and that is the Youth Employment Service. The beauty of that initiative is that it uses a government incentive to mobilize private sector funding, and the jobs are created by the economy, which makes it so much more sustainable. Globally, blended finance, that's a term we're all hearing a lot about. Blended finance is rising, using philanthropic and public funds to unlock private capital. The Rockefeller Foundation and Convergence have shown how de-risking mechanisms can open the flow of investments into expensive areas of investment like renewable energy and healthcare. The UN estimates that reaching the SDGs will cost in excess of $2.4 trillion annually. There is no government that can close that gap alone. So the idea of blended finance is to turn those billions into trillions. I think everybody in the room, when we talk about systemic change and partnership, I think there's a firm agreement that this is important, but it's difficult in reality. I think I personally have been in discussions with funders and social impact practitioners where there is this tension that you're not going to see this in your quarterly report. In fact, it won't fit neatly often in your annual report. And my team will even laugh because I'm not very patient. I want results now. But it's so important that we take the longer term view if we're really wanting to create sustainable change. We also need financing models that are flexible, patient, and brave. I mean, like the unicorn of financing models, you know. But I really do believe that if we want lasting change, this is the road we have to take. Another major trend, and I think the emergence of AI has really brought this to the fore, is moving from accounting to accountability, moving from inputs to outputs to outcomes to impact. So my team often tells me about a community project where a facility was built in a community. And this community facility won all sorts of international design awards, which was fantastic. Brilliant output. However, when they went back to the community, they realized that the facility wasn't being used because the acoustics were so bad. So that for me is just a brilliant example of the fact that you can have a great output, but unless you involve the communities in which you operate and really engage, you may not have the impact that even with the best intentions you hope to have. I think Tshikululu has seen some real successful measurement of social impact. So we worked with Valterra Platinum on a social return on investment study. The result, for every R1 invested, 11 Rand and 38 cents was the social return. So that's tenfold return. And what we're seeing is that globally this trend is accelerating. Communities and investors demand proof of impact, transparency, and ethical practices. I'm sure we all know about greenwashing, blue washing. I've now heard of purple and pink washing and rainbow washing, but it's just brought to the fore that it's so important that we measure what matters, that we're transparent. And from AI-driven reporting to blockchain-based verification, it's making accountability sharper and harder to ignore. This, I think, segues quite smoothly into the current spotlights on governance. There's been some news headlines recently that I think would make most of us in the social impact space very nervous around governance failures. And just, I think, Connie, you mentioned this sheen of South Africa that's no longer as shiny, and these type of headlines certainly don't help. So we at Tshikululu obviously are deeply invested in working with our clients to strengthen governance. Impact measurement and reporting is obviously very expensive. That is very important, which is something I've discussed. ESG regulation. There's more and more pressure to have ESG mandatory disclosures. Something that's interesting is that our team has now joined the Task Force on Inequality and Social-Related Financial Disclosures. I said to Richard, who's here in the audience, can you explain to me in English what that means, please? So what it is really is about the S in ESG and we're looking globally to see how do we measure, manage risk around the S in ESG. And I think everybody here in the room is aware that this is probably the most pressing challenge for us on the African continent. Board oversight is obviously very important. Due diligence. I think, so often with the best intentions, if due diligence is not done, it can, I think in the best case, make donors disappointed, and in the worst case, put entire projects and beneficiaries at risk. And then, of course, keeping the stakeholder and beneficiaries' voice right in the forefront of everything we do. Whoops, wrong side. There you go. We are in Women's Month this month. And it was actually interesting for me to see, I don't know if you noticed a trend this morning in the keynote speakers, how many female leaders we had here today. It's very inspiring. And I think gender-based investing is growing rapidly worldwide. Apparently, according to the Global Impact Investing Network, over $13 billion has already been allocated through gender-focused strategies. In the 2024 GIN survey, it showed that 90% of gender-led investors meet or exceed their financial expectations, and 97% achieved their impact targets. An example of a project that we've been involved with is with Valterra Platinum and their gender-based violence and femicide program. Valterra has invested over 450 million rand into its host community since 2021, with its GBVF program now in its third year. The beauty of this is that they partnered with 12 community-based organizations and 4 state facilities. The program strengthened local service delivery, capacity building, skills development, and infrastructure support. This enabled grassroots organizations to drive sustainable change. Apparently, without intensified gender lens investing, it is projected that 340 million women and girls will be living in extreme poverty by 2030. At Tshikululu, we are seeing more and more clients prioritizing gender-based violence interventions, women-owned enterprises, and women in leadership roles. This is more than a moral obligation. Research consistently shows us that women-led enterprises often outperform peers in both impact and sustainability. Gender equity is not just good ethics, it's good economics. I don't think you can have a conversation about social investment without talking about the green economy and how that is completely changing the investment landscape in the world. The climate crisis is no longer an abstract threat, it is here. In Sweden, Hybrid has pioneered hydrogen-based steelmaking, cutting coal out of the process completely. I think that's just amazing. Globally, green bonds and sustainability-linked loans topped $1 trillion in issuance in 2023. Closer to home, Tshikululu is very proud to be supporting South Africa's green transition by providing technical support to the Just Energy Transition Platform, which is through the presidency. This is not just a trend on the sidelines. It is the future of industrial and social development. So, what does the future demand of us in this room? I think it demands that purpose is at the core of everything we do. It's not a corporate add-on. We have to recognize that business success is inseparable from the communities in which we operate. And nation building is all of our responsibility. Blended finance, using public, private, and philanthropic finance models, working together to create the scale that we need. And obviously, genuine impact, measured with rigor and transparency and grounded in lived realities. It's been mentioned today that South Africa has shown it can change. The real question for all of us in the room is, are we ready to invest in the change at the scale that is required? Oops, I keep doing that, sorry. So our future, I believe, will be shaped by those who are willing to move from funding to futures, from isolation to collaboration, and from accounting to accountability. The challenge is in front of us, but so is the opportunity. So I encourage you, please, to make today about more than just conversation. The dialogue is fantastic, and I think it's a great starting point, but it's also about commitment. Commitment to being bold and brave, commitment to transformation, and to building the South Africa we all know is possible. So, thank you all for your attention and for joining us today. As I said, our team is here, we're ready to collaborate, and I hope this is just the start of a beautiful journey together. Thank you very much.